Okay, this is the fourth and final video in the Early Modern Philosophy series, and this video goes into Locke, Berkeley, and Hume. John Locke is the first philosopher to reflect systematically on the limits of reason and knowledge. He's a critic of the widespread theory of innate ideas that I've mentioned several times in the earlier videos. Locke traces ideas to what he calls a physiological origin. And what he means by that is they're derived from experience. We abstract our ideas, all of our inner ideas, all of our inner experience from outer experience. And he really thinks that, Locke thinks that all of our ideas, including our ideas about God, including the laws of logic, come to us from experience. He talks about the soul as a tabula rasa, a clean slate. We come into the world with a clean slate, and all of our ideas, all of our consciousness, all of our inner experience comes to us from the physical world. He does distinguish outer from inner experience. Kant follows his distinction, so outer experience is an experience of objects, and inner experience is an experience of the self. Locke distinguishes between simple ideas and complex ideas. Complex ideas show the connective activity of the mind. Now, where does the connective activity of the mind come from if it doesn't come from experience? Well, Kant is going to go after that puzzle and give a very different solution from the one that Locke gave, because Kant is going to turn out to give neither a rationalist solution nor an empiricist solution to the relationship between physical and mental reality. Simple ideas come to us from experience. Complex ideas are the result of some kind of processes of the mind that connect simple ideas to one another. So simple ideas are ideas of things. Complex ideas are ideas of what Locke calls the modes and relations of things. But only simple ideas are really objective, right? These complex ideas are subjective. And among the subjective ideas are self-consciousness. Self-consciousness doesn't really have an object. It is something that we sort of put together by means of an operation of the mind. So self-consciousness is something that is not fundamental. There's not an object to it. It's something that we develop as we go along through this connective activity of the mind. Right? Locke takes on the Descartes' cogito and the entire rationalist system. So Locke distinguishes primary from secondary qualities. Primary qualities are qualities of things. They're objective. Secondary qualities are modes and relations of things. That is, relations of things to consciousness. Secondary qualities are attributable to our sense organs or to activities of the mind. So, for instance, you might think of sounds as secondary qualities because what's out there in the world is vibrations of the air, right? But sounds, as we experience them, are the result of processing through our organs of hearing and processing through the mind's way of sort of connecting those representations to one another. So Locke interprets all of our qualitative ideas as quantitative processes, right? So if you think about vision, and in particular about color, it looks like colors are qualitative, right? It looks like orange really is different, a different kind of light, right, from blue. But Locke recognizes that objectively there is not a difference in quality between orange and blue. There's only a difference of quantity. They correspond to two different wavelengths of light. They're just numbers, right? And as numbers, they don't differ at all in quality from one another. They all only differ in quantity from one another, right? So orange and blue appear to us to be two completely different kinds of light. And for Locke, no, they're one kind of light. It's just that the light waves have slightly different frequencies from one another. And by the way, if they had massively different frequencies from one another, we wouldn't see them, okay? Because we see a fairly narrow part of the electromagnetic range. So our knowledge for Locke only stretches as far as our objective experience. And so religion, for instance, religious beliefs, religious doctrines for Locke should only be accepted insofar as they accord with our own reason, because God is unknowable, God cannot appear in our experience, and so we have to depend upon our own reason, which is derived from experience, to decide whether certain beliefs about God are rational or not. And you'll see Kant echo Locke in many ways with regard to religion. Kant doesn't think that religion is irrational, but he certainly thinks that it's possible to have certain religious beliefs that are more rational than others. In fact, certain religious beliefs that cannot be held by a thinking person, whereas other religious beliefs Kant will think must be held by a rational person. Now, George Berkeley goes beyond Locke and claims that even primary qualities are subjective, right? Berkeley thinks we can't represent anything general, like a triangle. We only give ourselves the illusion of general concepts by making the singular stand in place of the general, right? So he means something like this, that we think we know what it means to be an object, a physical object, right? So this general idea, there are physical objects out there. But Berkeley would say, no, what's really going on in the mind is choosing something like this mug that here it has a nice design on this side, this mug that I brought home from China a few years ago. That what the mind is really doing is it's taking something like this individual object, this mug, and it is allowing it to stand in for a whole group of objects, of other objects. But what I'm really thinking, when I think physical object as a general idea, I'm thinking the mug, right? And I'm allowing that singular object to stand in for a whole group of objects. But it's a kind of illusion that it's possible for me to have these general ideas. So we only function through individual, singular representations. Any objective knowledge would require us to have general ideas. That's a very compact version of Berkeley's argument. But I only have knowledge of my own representations for Berkeley, not of any outer reality beyond the mind. A little disturbing, right? So things don't exist apart from the mind, right? It's not that there's a physical reality out there, a material reality, and we're not in touch with it for Berkeley. What's going on is there is no matter out there. All of existence, all of reality is happening within minds, our mind and God's mind. So matter doesn't exist. Matter is a self-contradictory notion for Berkeley. All of our ideas come from God. Human experience is essentially just what God projects from God's mind into our mind. there's no outer reality. So what we have in Berkeley is the occasionalism of Malebranche without outer physical reality. Because on every occasion, God miraculously beams the truth into the human mind so that we can experience it. Now, finally, and I'll make this as quick as I can, David Hume. Hume is even more radical than Locke. Locke is still influenced by scholasticism. Hume has the most strict empiricism, the strictest empiricism of all of these early modern thinkers. So for Hume, all of our experience is impressions or ideas, either perceptions or thoughts. Like Locke, there are no general ideas, only singular ideas. Hume rejects the whole distinction between primary and secondary ideas, because primary ideas cannot prove how the outer world is structured. We can't say anything for certain about things because we have no general representations. We can't say anything about the soul because saying something about the soul would be saying something about what's in common between your soul and my soul, right? That would require a general idea, a general representation, so that I could say souls, right, have certain qualities that make them belong to this class that we call soul. We want the soul to be enduring so that we can be less insecure about it, but Hume doesn't necessarily believe in the continuity of personal identity over time. So this is a problem that that Kant is going to have to solve, that Hume doesn't even believe in consciousness. So if you go back to Descartes' I think, therefore I am, Hume doesn't even think we can identify an I, that we can pick out an I, a self in human experience and human consciousness. He thinks of this as an illusion that we produce in order to have a greater sense of security. That's probably the most radical thing that Hume does, but he does something almost equally radical with the external world, with cause and effect, because we want to think that cause and effect is something that's actually happening out there in the world. But for Hume, causality is just a habit that we get into of connecting certain impressions with other impressions. So if we see one thing follow another twice, 3 times, we expect it. We want the same thing to happen again, to allay, to calm our insecurity in the face of chaos. But for Hume, there is nothing. Philosophy can offer nothing to the common person who is afraid that nothing out there is real, or at least if something out there is real, is afraid that what we experience is not reality. So Hume leaves us with a kind of desperation in the face of this chaos of a mind that is not necessarily even connected, even having a series of connected representations that could justify a belief in personal identity. So we don't even have a mind, much less a mind that's in touch with reality. And of course that's disturbing, but Hume claims, and I think he's right, that this is only disturbing to philosophers, right? That common human beings don't worry about this sort of thing. They say, look, there is the physical material world. It's real. Why would I even begin to doubt that? But Hume, as a philosopher, is very interested in this problem. How is it that we prove? How is it that we can possibly prove that there is a reality out there beyond the mind, even that there's a stable reality within the mind? Hume thinks that we cannot. So that's part of the problem that Kant comes along and tries to solve. because essentially where Hume ends up is that reason is worthless, right? And that what truly has worth is common life and the customary beliefs that we have, the relationships that we have in society, not what goes on at this very high level of intellectual puzzles. Kant is going to want to say that, in fact, there is a value to reason, but it may not go as far as the rationalist metaphysicians wanted it to go. Okay, I'll see you in class.